That's the passion for it for you. That's the...
Yes, it's fascinating to me. And people constantly ask me to try to get into the mind of a collector, and I'm a collector myself. And I don't even understand my mind as much as...
For more than 15 years, Mike Wolfe seemed to embody the American dream, a small-town picker who turned a lifelong passion for forgotten treasures into one of cable television's biggest success stories. But away from the dusty barns, vintage motorcycles, and million-dollar discoveries, a far more complicated story was unfolding. Today, we'll take a peek behind the curtain and reveal what really happened to Mike Wolfe from American Pickers. The friendship that fell apart. Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz. For more than a decade, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz were inseparable in the eyes of television audiences. Every episode of American Pickers revolved around their easy chemistry as they wandered through barns, machine sheds, warehouses, and forgotten collections across America. They teased one another, argued over purchases, and celebrated unexpected discoveries together. But behind the scenes, one of reality television's longest-running partnerships was quietly unraveling. What began as a friendship dating back to middle school eventually became the biggest controversy in the history of American Pickers. You see, Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz first met as teenagers growing up in Iowa. They shared similar backgrounds, a fascination with motorcycles and antiques, and a love for finding value where others saw junk. Before television, they spent years attending flea markets, estate sales, swap meets, and farm auctions throughout the Midwest. When Wolfe spent nearly 5 years pitching American Pickers to television networks, Frank was the obvious choice to join him. Their shared history couldn't be manufactured by casting directors. It had been built over more than 30 years of friendship before a single camera began rolling in 2010. As American Pickers became one of the History Channel's highest-rated programs, viewers rarely saw the physical toll the job was taking on Frank. He had lived for years with Crohn's disease, a chronic inflammatory bowel disease that can cause severe abdominal pain, fatigue, weight loss, and digestive complications. Frank spoke openly about the condition on several occasions, explaining that stress and constant travel often aggravated his symptoms. Despite those challenges, he continued filming season after season, often spending months each year driving thousands of miles in search of antiques. Frank's health worsened significantly in early 2020. In March of that year, he stopped filming after undergoing extensive back surgery to treat chronic spinal problems. The operation required screws and rods to stabilize his back, followed by a lengthy recovery. During that period, viewers noticed his absence but initially received little explanation from either the show or the network. As weeks turned into months, speculation spread online. Some fans assumed Frank would return once he recovered, while others wondered whether something much more serious had happened behind the scenes. Then, in July 2021, Mike Wolfe announced that Frank would not be returning. Wolfe wrote on Instagram that he had known Frank for more than half his life and described him as like a brother. He added that he would miss Frank's humor and hoped his former co-star found peace and healing. The History Channel subsequently confirmed that Frank's departure from the series was permanent. For many viewers, however, the announcement raised more questions than it answered. Frank himself had not publicly announced any decision to leave the show. Only days later, Frank gave an interview that dramatically changed the public narrative. Speaking to The Sun, he revealed that he and Mike had not spoken in approximately 2 years. Frank said he felt abandoned during one of the most difficult periods of his life, explaining that after his back surgery, Mike never contacted him to ask how he was recovering. "He knew my back was messed up," Frank said. "Everybody knew." Frank also suggested that deeper frustrations had existed for years. According to him, American Pickers had gradually become centered almost entirely around Mike Wolfe. He argued that the series increasingly portrayed Mike as its unquestioned star while relegating Frank to a secondary role. In one of his most quoted remarks, Frank claimed the show was tilted toward Mike 1,000%. Whether that reflected actual production decisions or Frank's personal disappointment remains impossible to verify. But the interview changed public perception of their relationship. Health complications continued to shape Frank's story. Following his back surgery, he acknowledged struggling with an addiction to prescription pain medication. He eventually entered rehabilitation and later spoke publicly about achieving sobriety. Reports also emerged that his medical condition and recovery complicated any potential return to filming. While some media reports suggested concerns about workplace policies regarding medication use, neither the History Channel nor Frank ever provided a comprehensive public explanation detailing every factor behind his departure. Mike Wolfe addressed the situation more cautiously. Rather than publicly disputing Frank's accusations, he described the breakup as deeply painful and compared it to losing a brother. He repeatedly expressed hope that Frank would continue focusing on his health and recovery. Wolfe largely avoided discussing private disagreements in interviews, choosing instead to emphasize the years they had shared building the show together. His restraint, however, did little to calm an increasingly divided fan base. Viewer reaction was swift and emotional. Social media platforms filled with messages demanding Frank's return, while online petitions gathered thousands of signatures urging the History Channel to reunite the original cast. Many longtime viewers argued that the chemistry between Mike and Frank had been the defining feature of American Pickers since its January 2010 debut. Without that partnership, they believed the series had lost part of its identity. Some fans stopped watching altogether. The controversy intensified when Mike's older brother, Robbie Wolfe, began appearing more frequently before becoming a regular member of the cast. Robbie had occasionally appeared on the show for years, helping with restoration projects and business operations, but his expanded role after Frank's departure drew criticism. Some viewers accused the series of replacing one lifelong friend with a family member, fueling allegations of favoritism or nepotism. Then, in July 2022, Frank suffered a devastating stroke that left him partially paralyzed and requiring long-term care. Over time, Mike and Frank quietly re-established contact away from public attention. According to those close to them, the two reconciled before Frank's death on September 30th, 2024, at the age of 60. Mike later revealed that he had been able to spend time with Frank during his final days and shared a heartfelt tribute celebrating his longtime friend as a dreamer, a gifted picker, and someone who had helped build one of cable television's most successful reality series. But all was not well in Mike's life, too. Personal tragedies behind the cameras. For years, viewers knew Mike Wolfe as the man who always seemed to be chasing the next great discovery. Whether he was digging through a century-old barn in Iowa or uncovering vintage motorcycles in Tennessee, he projected an image of optimism and curiosity. But while American Pickers celebrated forgotten treasures and remarkable finds, some of the most significant events in Wolfe's own life were unfolding away from the cameras. One of the earliest personal challenges involved his wife, Jody Fayeth. Mike and Jody married on September 8, 2012, after several years together, and were already raising their daughter, Charlie Faith Wolfe, who had been born in January 2012. Just a year into their marriage, the family received devastating news. In 2013, Jody was diagnosed with stage 2 non-Hodgkin lymphoma, a cancer that begins in the lymphatic system and can spread throughout the body if left untreated. At the time, Mike was balancing a demanding filming schedule that often kept him traveling across the country for months at a time, while Jody faced chemotherapy and the uncertainty that comes with any cancer diagnosis. Fortunately, Jody's treatment proved successful. After years of medical care and regular monitoring, she was eventually declared cancer-free in 2020. Ironically, that same year also marked the beginning of another painful transition. Court records later showed that Mike and Jody separated in June 2020 after nearly 8 years of marriage. Unlike many celebrity breakups that unfold across social media, both largely kept the separation private, while legal proceedings moved forward. Their divorce was finalized in December 2021, with the official filing citing irreconcilable differences. Neither publicly detailed the specific reasons behind the end of the marriage. The financial settlement that followed, attracted considerable media attention because of Mike's success through American Pickers and his business ventures. Publicly reported court documents indicated that Jody received assets valued at approximately $5.8 million, including cash and real estate. She was also awarded interests connected to royalties from American Pickers, along with monthly child support reported at approximately $2,100 for the couple's daughter. Despite the divorce, one aspect of Mike's personal life remained consistent: his relationship with his daughter, Charlie. Throughout the years following the separation, Mike has continued sharing occasional glimpses of fatherhood through social media, posting photographs from family outings, birthdays, and holidays, while generally keeping Charlie out of the spotlight. To understand how Mike Wolfe reached this point, we need to go back to where it all began: the rise of America's most famous picker. Long before millions of television viewers watched him rummage through dusty barns and forgotten garages, Mike Wolfe was already living the life that would eventually define his career. Born on June 11, 1964 in Joliet, Illinois, Wolfe grew up in Bettendorf, Iowa, where his single mother, Rita Wolfe, raised him and his siblings, Beth and Robbie. Money was tight. The family had to make do with what little they had. For young Mike, however, scarcity became an opportunity. At just 6 years old, he spotted an abandoned banana seat bicycle hidden in the weeds behind a neighbor's property. After cleaning it up and pumping air into the tires, he sold it for $5. The profit itself was small, but the experience revealed something much bigger. Forgotten objects could have value if someone was willing to see it. That discovery turned into an obsession. While many children spent weekends playing sports, Wolfe wandered alleys, barns, junkyards, and garage sales searching for old bicycles, advertising signs, motorcycle parts, and vintage Americana. He wasn't simply collecting antiques. He was learning how to recognize craftsmanship, negotiate prices, repair damaged items, and understand the stories attached to them. This was the beginning of something great. By his teenage years, he had already developed an instinct that many professional antique dealers spend decades trying to master. As an adult, Wolfe transformed that lifelong hobby into a profession. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, he traveled thousands of miles across America's rural back roads, knocking on farmhouse doors and asking a simple question that would later become famous: "Got any old bikes?" The answer often led him into barns that had not been opened in decades. Unlike traditional antique dealers who waited for items to appear at auctions or estate sales, Wolfe went directly to the source, building relationships with families who had quietly preserved generations of forgotten collectibles. Around 2000, he opened Antique Archaeology in LeClaire, Iowa, turning his personal philosophy into a business. Even then, Wolfe believed the real story wasn't the antiques themselves, but the people behind them. He carried a video camera during many of his picking trips, documenting the unusual places he visited and the colorful personalities he encountered. Over time, he assembled hours of footage. This allowed him to show a side of rural America rarely seen on television. Instead of focusing on high-priced collectibles or glamorous auctions, his recordings highlighted ordinary people who had unknowingly become caretakers of history. Convinced there was an audience for these stories, Wolfe began pitching the concept to television networks. The response was almost universally negative. For roughly 5 years, Wolfe refused to abandon the idea despite repeated rejections. His persistence finally paid off in 2009, when the History Channel agreed to produce the series. At a time when historical reality programming was gaining momentum through shows like Pawn Stars and Ice Road Truckers, executives recognized that Wolfe's idea offered something different. American Pickers premiered on January 18, 2010, and quickly exceeded expectations. The first episode attracted approximately 3.1 million viewers, making it one of the strongest debuts in the History Channel's history at the time. Within weeks, audiences climbed even higher, approaching 4 million viewers for early episodes. The series consistently ranked among cable television's most watched nonfiction programs, turning Wolfe from a respected antique dealer into one of the most recognizable faces on television. At the same time, antique archaeology became a destination for fans, eventually expanding with a second location in Nashville, Tennessee, inside the city's historic Marathon Motor Works complex. While Wolfe created the concept, the show's success depended heavily on another familiar face, Frank Fritz. The two men had known each other since middle school in Iowa, bonding over motorcycles, antiques, and a fascination with forgotten collectibles. Their friendship stretched back more than 4 decades before television cameras ever entered the picture. That history created a chemistry that audiences immediately recognized. Wolfe often gravitated toward vintage motorcycles, bicycles, signs, and advertising memorabilia, while Fritz developed a reputation for spotting unusual toys, oil cans, cast-iron collectibles, and quirky Americana. Their different interests complemented one another. What distinguished American Pickers from many reality programs was the authenticity of those interactions. Although filming locations were researched and arranged in advance by production staff, the conversations between Wolfe, Fritz, and property owners felt natural because they were built on years of real experience. The pair spoke the same language as lifelong collectors, discussing manufacturing methods, regional history, restoration techniques, and market values without relying on scripted dialogue. Many sellers were less interested in the money than in finding someone who genuinely appreciated the history behind their possessions. But as American Pickers became one of television's biggest hits, its success also brought growing skepticism. When success brought scrutiny, is American Pickers really reality? As American Pickers became one of the History Channel's signature programs, millions of viewers watched Wolfe and Frank Fritz stumble across seemingly impossible discoveries hidden inside weathered barns, abandoned gas stations, and forgotten warehouses. But the bigger the audience grew, the more people began asking an uncomfortable question. Were these incredible finds really happening by chance? Or was television magic quietly working behind the scenes? The suspicion wasn't entirely surprising. On television, Wolfe and Fritz often appeared to drive into unfamiliar towns, knock on a random door, and within minutes uncover a rare motorcycle, vintage advertising sign, or classic automobile that had sat untouched for decades. To longtime collectors, the odds sometimes seemed almost too perfect. Antique dealers know that successful picking requires countless dead ends, long drives, and property owners who refuse to sell anything. Yet viewers mostly saw successful negotiations and remarkable discoveries, leading many to wonder whether the difficult parts had simply been edited out, or whether the locations had been selected in advance. In reality, members of the production team have openly acknowledged that American Pickers is carefully organized before cameras ever start rolling. Producers research regions weeks or even months ahead of filming, identify promising collections, contact property owners, obtain filming permissions, and plan travel routes that make production practical. Occasionally, local collectors, historical societies, or previous contacts recommend locations worth visiting. That planning serves a practical purpose. A television crew involving cameras, lighting equipment, sound technicians, producers, and multiple vehicles cannot realistically drive across America hoping that someone answers the door with a once-in-a-lifetime collection waiting inside. Mike Wolfe himself has repeatedly explained that while locations are researched beforehand, he often has little idea exactly what waits behind a particular barn door. Owners may describe having old motorcycles or a collection of signs, but the precise condition, rarity, quantity, and historical significance usually remain unknown until filming begins. Even experienced collectors cannot reliably predict what decades-old buildings contain without physically exploring them. Many properties also contain hundreds or even thousands of items accumulated over generations, making every visit an exercise in genuine discovery despite the advanced planning. Perhaps no episode generated more debate than Shelby in the Barn, which aired during season 17 in 2016. Wolfe and fellow picker Danielle Colby had initially been pursuing an entirely different lead before Wolfe and antique expert Jersey John uncovered something extraordinary: a dusty 1967 Shelby GT 500 Mustang hidden inside an Alabama barn. To automotive enthusiasts, the significance was immediately obvious. Carroll Shelby's high-performance Mustangs rank among the most desirable American muscle cars ever built, and surviving original examples can command prices well into six figures, depending on condition, originality, and provenance. Finding one that had remained untouched for decades seemed almost too perfect to believe. Within hours of the episode airing, online forums, Facebook groups, and Reddit discussions exploded with skepticism. Many viewers argued that such an extraordinary discovery simply could not have happened organically with cameras conveniently rolling. Others questioned why producers appeared to arrive looking for one collectible, but somehow uncovered one of the rarest muscle cars in America instead. Some fans suggested that production staff must have known about the Mustang all along and built the episode around its reveal. The scene quickly became one of the most debated moments in the show's history. Yet speculation remained just that: speculation. No credible evidence has ever emerged showing that the Shelby Mustang was planted, borrowed, or secretly moved into the barn for filming. Nor has anyone connected with the property alleged that the discovery itself was fabricated. In fact, the owner ultimately declined to sell the car despite Wolfe's interest. The Shelby episode also highlighted an important distinction that often gets lost in discussions about reality television. A program can be heavily produced without being fictional. Production planning determines where crews travel, how episodes are structured, and which conversations appear on screen. Fabrication, by contrast, would involve inventing discoveries, scripting negotiations, or falsely presenting objects as newly found when they were not. Those are very different practices. But wait, there's more. Questions about business practices and the ethics of picking. Let's start with a simple question. When an experienced picker buys a valuable item from someone who doesn't fully understand its market value, is that good business or exploitation? You see, unlike traditional retail stores where prices are clearly marked, the antiques market operates on negotiation, expertise, and risk. A rusty motorcycle hidden in a barn might be worth $500, $5,000, or $50,000 depending on condition, rarity, documentation, and demand. Professional pickers spend years learning how to identify those differences. Critics argue that this knowledge creates an uneven playing field. When viewers watched Wolfe purchase an item for a few $100s and later discuss significantly higher resale values, some felt that sellers were being shortchanged. Social media discussions and online forums frequently questioned whether television was celebrating business savvy or taking advantage of people who lacked specialized knowledge. Yet, the reality of the antique trade is more complicated than it first appears. Most transactions featured on American Pickers involve lengthy conversations in which owners discuss the history of their items, share personal stories, and actively participate in negotiations. Unlike pawn transactions, where sellers may need immediate cash, many property owners featured on the show are under no pressure to sell. In fact, one recurring pattern throughout the series is owners refusing offers. Wolfe has walked away from countless motorcycles, advertising signs, gas pumps, and automobiles after negotiations failed. Another factor rarely visible to casual viewers is the financial risk assumed by buyers. An antique that appears valuable may require thousands of dollars in restoration, transportation, storage, insurance, and marketing before it can be sold. A picker purchasing a rare motorcycle for $3,000 may later spend another $4,000 repairing it, only to discover that the market has weakened or buyers are no longer interested. Professional antique dealers survive because they correctly assess those risks more often than they fail. The profit margin reflects not only expertise, but also uncertainty. That reality has long been used by dealers and collectors to defend the business model against accusations of unfairness. As Mike Wolfe's television fame expanded, scrutiny also shifted toward his business operations. Antique archaeology, founded in LeClaire, Iowa, eventually grew into one of the most recognizable antique brands in America. The company later opened a second location in Nashville, Tennessee, inside the historic Marathon Motor Works complex. What began as a regional antiques business evolved into a destination for tourists traveling specifically because of the television show. That transition from antique shop to tourist attraction created a new source of criticism. Some visitors expecting rooms packed with rare collectibles were surprised to find large sections devoted to branded merchandise. Then, in 2022, a buyer filed a complaint involving an online purchase through Antique Archaeology's website. According to the complaint, the customer completed an order, received confirmation, and later learned that the transaction had been canceled. The buyer suspected the company had accepted a better offer from another customer and requested that the original purchase be honored. The allegation quickly attracted attention because it appeared to challenge the business practices of a company built around authenticity and trust. Antique Archaeology responded with a different explanation. According to the company, 2 customers had purchased the same item within a short period due to an inventory management error on the website. Because the system failed to update availability quickly enough, both transactions were processed before staff realized the problem. One order was fulfilled while the second customer received a refund. The company stated that the issue resulted from a technical glitch, rather than a deliberate decision to seek a higher-paying buyer. But it only gets worse from here on. Preservation or gentrification? The Columbia debate. By the early 2020s, Mike Wolfe had expanded his reputation far beyond searching dusty barns for antique motorcycles and vintage signs. Increasingly, his attention shifted towards something much larger, preserving the historic fabric of entire communities. No place reflected that ambition more than Columbia, Tennessee, a city of roughly 45,000 residents located about 45 miles south of Nashville. Known for its 19th-century downtown and historic architecture, Columbia had long attracted preservationists, but Wolfe saw something more. To him, the city's aging buildings were opportunities to write a new chapter without erasing the old one. What followed became one of the most debated chapters of his career. Wolfe first developed strong ties to Columbia after spending years in Tennessee filming American Pickers and operating the Nashville branch of Antique Archaeology. He eventually began purchasing properties in Columbia with the goal of restoring them rather than demolishing them. One of his most notable acquisitions was the historic Rally Hill property, an antebellum home dating back to the mid-1800s that he purchased in 2022 for approximately $700,000. Rather than modernizing the estate beyond recognition, Wolfe reportedly invested well over $1 million into carefully restoring the home. His investments didn't stop with private residences. Wolfe acquired additional commercial properties throughout Columbia, including spaces connected to hospitality, retail, and community gathering. Among them was Two Lanes Guest House, a boutique accommodation inspired by vintage Americana and road trip culture, along with projects connected to his growing interest in motorcycles and historic downtown commerce. Instead of building entirely new developments on vacant land, Wolfe consistently favored adapting older structures for new purposes. Supporters viewed those projects as exactly the kind of investment many small American towns desperately needed. Like countless historic communities across the United States, Columbia had experienced decades of economic shifts as manufacturing declined and commercial activity moved towards suburban shopping centers. Restored buildings attracted restaurants, boutique retailers, tourists, and entrepreneurs who might otherwise have overlooked the downtown district. Preservation advocates argued that Wolfe's investments demonstrated how historic architecture could become an economic asset rather than a financial burden. Empty storefronts, once considered liabilities, began finding new tenants, while restored buildings helped strengthen Columbia's identity. Wolfe's preservation work also extended beyond his own real estate portfolio. For years, he had partnered with the National Trust for Historic Preservation, supporting initiatives such as the This Place Matters campaign, which encourages communities to protect culturally significant buildings and landmarks. He repeatedly argued that preserving architecture meant preserving the stories of ordinary Americans whose lives had unfolded inside those structures. At the same time, Colombia was undergoing dramatic change that extended far beyond Wolfe's individual projects. Located within commuting distance of Nashville, the city became increasingly attractive to new residents seeking lower housing costs and a slower pace of life. Population growth accelerated throughout Maury County, bringing new subdivisions, commercial developments, and infrastructure projects. As demand increased, home prices and property values also rose. Some residents worried that the very improvements being celebrated would ultimately make Colombia less affordable for the people who had lived there for generations. Restored buildings attracted visitors and new businesses, but they also contributed to rising commercial rents and increasing real estate values. Critics argued that revitalization sometimes carries unintended consequences, particularly when outside investment transforms neighborhoods faster than local wages can keep pace. While Wolfe himself was only one investor among many, his celebrity status made him one of the most visible faces associated with Colombia's transformation. Concerns intensified as larger development proposals entered public discussion. Among the most debated was a proposed $83 million six-story condominium and mixed-use development planned near Colombia's historic downtown. Although Wolfe was not responsible for that project, conversations about growth increasingly blurred together in public debate. Residents who feared losing Colombia's small-town atmosphere often pointed to multiple redevelopment efforts collectively rather than separating individual projects. The debate revealed an interesting paradox. Wolfe's stated goal had always been preservation rather than replacement. His projects emphasized restoring historic buildings instead of demolishing them. Yet critics argued that preserving physical structures alone does not necessarily preserve the social character of a community. If longtime residents eventually find themselves priced out by rising property values or higher rents, has the town truly been preserved? Whatever your position is on the matter, Mike Wolfe remains the face of American pickers. But his story is far more complex than the treasure-hunting image that first made him famous. While the show's ratings have naturally declined from their early peak, it continues producing new episodes, and Wolfe remains active through historic preservation projects, motorcycle collecting, and his antique archaeology business. In April 2025, he announced that he was permanently closing the Nashville Antique Archaeology store after nearly 15 years, explaining that the decision was driven by a desire to spend more time with family, slow down, stay rooted, and focus on new projects, while continuing to operate the original LeClaire, Iowa store and his online business. Even so, online speculation continued to fuel unfounded rumors of financial collapse, bankruptcy, arrests, fraud investigations, and claims that he had been forced off television. None of those claims were supported by evidence. Instead, his public image has been shaped far more by personal hardships, including the loss of Frank Fritz, his divorce, and public controversies surrounding his business and preservation efforts than by any scandal or criminal wrongdoing. Separating verified facts from internet speculation reveals a far less dramatic but far more accurate story of a television personality navigating fame, criticism, and personal loss. As he continues the work that first made him successful, well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.